Hello, everyone. Thank you all for tuning in to Real Talk with Steph Crosley and Friends. I'm your host, Steph Crosley. Thank you to everyone at home who's watching. Thank you to everyone who's here with us today. We truly appreciate it. Before we get started, if you guys can go ahead and like this video first, that will be greatly appreciated. For those of you who are in the audience, the video is being shared on the Steph Crosley page. And then from the like, if you can go ahead and click that share button. I was always told the greatest gift you can give someone else is knowledge. Okay? There's tons of people who may not know this is happening and will be able to receive the message by a simple share. So if you guys can go ahead and share this video, that too will be greatly appreciated. All right, so we're going to go ahead and get into 60 Seconds with Steph. As many of you guys know, 60 Seconds with Steph, I like to use the next 60 seconds to dedicate towards an issue, to raise awareness about something that's happening in our community. Today, my focus is on youth suicide. This is something that has really been hitting home in working in the community and working with the youth. I'm not sure if any of you guys have heard, because I haven't seen any stories about it. I only was made aware after being inside of the different school, but a young man by the name of Clifton Kincaid committed suicide, a freshman at Rufus King High School. And the day I actually heard about Clifton's suicide, I was on Instagram, and I also came across a young lady, Ashley Loveface. She's not from Milwaukee, but this is a young lady with over 400,000 followers on Instagram. And then a couple of days after that, I read a story about a young man, 10 years old, Seven Bridges. His mom went to the grocery store, came back, and found her son. She found her son had hung himself, and that broke my heart, because when I think of children and I think of youth, I think about a time that's supposed to be a time that you're supposed to be living your best life. You shouldn't have any worries. In those three situations, all three situations were different. All three kids were different, but they had one thing in common, and that one thing was they felt that the easy way out or the better way out was to take their own lives, and no child should feel that way. So this is my push to everyone watching this video. Just be mindful of the youth you're working with, the youth that are in your homes. Talk with them, get to know them, feed into them, empower them, love on them, because they need it. One story that I came across, and I know I passed my 60 seconds, but this topic is really important. Another story I read about, a mother, she said that she saw her son, and he was being very shy and just to himself, and she instantly chucked it up as he's just being a lazy, bored teen. A couple days after that, he took his own life, but he left her a letter stating that he was depressed and he wasn't happy with his life. That's really heartbreaking. I'm sorry, y'all. That really touches my heart, and just having nieces and nephews, it's real out here. It said that the brain development of youth between 10 and 19, they're more likely, more inclined to dabble in tricky behavior, risky behavior when they're dealing with traumatic issues. And that ultimately, most times, lead to suicide. So please talk with your kids, your youth, your teens, everyone, because it's important. Sorry, I had to take a little longer than 60 seconds, but bear with me, okay? You all have a challenge after today. Now, sorry I had to open up on that sad note, but I do want to do Steph's Spotlight, and today's Spotlight goes to the Marquette men's and women's basketball team. You guys can clap it up. Not because it's National Marquette Weekend, but most of you guys know I do serve as an in-game host for both the men and women basketball team, and they're playing some phenomenal basketball. The last I checked, they were the only team in the nation with 2 teams in the top 25. So let's hear it one more time for Marquette men's and women's basketball. All right, yes, go Marquette, blue and gold. So I definitely want to get into the purpose of today's conversation. And today's conversation is Real Talk, I have mommy and daddy issues. This topic was inspired by my self-development book, With Love, shameless plug. But it's influenced and inspired by my self-development book, With Love. And With Love came about after a breakup. I had to question myself, and I said, self, what's going on? Why are all of your relationships ending the same way? You're not dating the same person. So why is your relationship ending the same way? And the last one was, it was very depressing, but it was more so on my part. And I had to take some time and actually reflect on my own self. What am I doing to contribute? And during my reflection, I came across the whole idea of love. What is love? This is something I know nothing about at all. When I really sat down thinking about it, I knew nothing about the topic. And then I had to go down, dig a little deeper. Why don't I know anything about this topic? And it came from the fact that I didn't have my mom and daddy growing up. My caretakers did not feed into me. They didn't give me or show me any love. I'm appreciative of those who took care of me, but it's the mom and your dad who really sets the tone for you. That's what I found in my journey, on my journey, let me say that. And during this time, I found out I always questioned my self-worth. So I dealt with people that I didn't necessarily love. I mean, I love y'all. I didn't necessarily love or was not in love with, but I was trying to fill a void. I wanted to feel needed. So subconsciously, I attracted people who I felt needed me. And that came from, again, not having my mom and my dad around. And that's what that's how the book came about. And then as I grew to understand that, my relationships failed because I was only loving at my level of comprehension, that I couldn't love people the way they needed to. Okay? And then in conversation and accepting that in conversation with other people, I learned that there are a lot of us who are dealing with mommy and daddy issues, and a lot of us happen to sweep it under the rug and not deal with it because we think, you know what, I'm going to give my child a better life. I'm not thinking about mom and daddy, not even realizing those mommy and daddy issues are in our subconscious. So even when we don't want to deal with it, we're dealing with it. So that's really what today is about. I'm an advocate, huge advocate for self-love. I think it's the start of everything phenomenal that comes our way. So today we will be focusing on mommy and daddy issues. I have some amazing friends here with me tonight, and I can't wait for you guys to meet them. And I'm going to go ahead and call up my first two guests. Miss Deanna Chambers and Barbara Peterson. Both have their own stories, their own issues they've dealt with, and they're here to share with all of us. You guys can give it up for Miss Barbara and Miss Deanna. They are phenomenal women, phenomenally. Shout out to Maya Angelou. All right, ladies, so how are you doing? Good. So, Deanna, we're going to start with you. Can you give us a quick overview of your relationship with your parents?
The relationship with my parents, honestly, isn't the best. Me and growing up, my mom or my dad wasn't in my life. I had my aunt and uncle raise me as a child. My dad wasn't around. My mom in and out here and there, but my dad wasn't there at all. As I got older, I do have a relationship a little bit now with my father within this last year or so. With my mom, it's still a very struggle. I have little sisters and brothers that I love, so I'm around because of them, but it's still like a big thing with my mom.
Interesting. We're going to get back into that. Barbara, can you give us an overview as to your childhood and your relationship?
Well, my mom and my father, they were together like the first 10 years of my life. So when she divorced him, it was kind of like he divorced us too. So it went from him being there, the breadwinner of the family, to just nothing. So just to give an overview, like the past 15 years of my life, I probably talked to him 3 times. So there's no relationship at all. He does live here right in Milwaukee. It's just no relationship.
Okay, keep the mic for me. Can you talk about, so going back to that 10-year-old in which you saw your parents go their separate ways, did you have any idea that your dad would leave completely?
No, I had no idea that, if I looked up at the age of 31 that we would have no relationship. I thought, okay, there's gonna be separate households, but as I got older and I realized, okay, it's 5th grade graduation, he's not here, middle school graduation, he's not here, he doesn't call. You know, as I got older, I began to notice, like, okay, he's just not gonna be around. So something that I had to learn to deal with.
And how did that make you feel?
I was very hurt. I was very confused. I didn't understand it for a while. And my mother did overcompensate a lot, you know, to kind of, you know, fill in that void. And I felt like, you know, if I was an overachiever, or if I was good in school, or if I did this and this and that, he would come around, and it was nothing I could do.
happen.
Yeah.
Okay, so even going back to that, so you are working your ass off.
Yeah.
To be this great person for this man that you love, and he's not giving you that love in return. Have you ever told him this?
No, I really haven't had a real conversation with him about it, because I just feel like it wasn't a point, because it was also drugs involved. And it's like, once that involved, it's like, it's really nothing you could do, you know. He knew I was feeling the void. He knew I was hurt. My mom expressed it to him, but for nothing to happen, it was just like, you know, what was the point of talking about it?
Do you at all feel any way towards your mom for the divorce and the fact that your dad is gone?
Not at
or
all.
no longer in your life?
No, I don't feel any way towards her at all. I respect her with the utmost, because, like I said, she did overcompensate. She did try to fill that void, and she did the best that she could, especially with me and having a brother with a disability. I feel like she held it down.
Okay. And then, and we're going to get to you really quickly, Deanna. But since we have Barb right here and we're talking about your father, and we know that it's Valentine's Day, and we want to talk a little bit about relationships
Right.
too. Let's talk about your love life and how have you seen an effect from your dad's void?
Yeah, I did. It was very hard for me to open up and trust. While everyone else was like having a boyfriend and losing their virginity, and I was just so closed off, and I couldn't open up to people for a while. And even when I did get in a relationship, even now, it's a trust factor. It's like, you were supposed to set an example on how to trust men, and I never got that example. So in relationships, it's just, I go into it and I don't trust. Like, I was like 16, 17-year-old hacking MySpace and stuff like that, and that wasn't the way to be, because if you want a successful relationship, trust needs to be there. And it was just, I was starting off so many relationships with the wrong foundation.
Okay, so are you trusting now, or are you still in the process of learning to trust? And what are you doing to help it?
I'm not snooping. I'm trusting a little more. I'm not like exactly like I said how I used to be. Like, I would literally, you know, I felt like I was supposed to be able to go through your phone. I felt like I was supposed to be able to go on your social media. And like I said, that is not a way to build a foundation on a relationship. It's not going to be able to be successful without that factor. So
My last question before I get to Deanna is, how do you feel about yourself, like in the process?
in the process, I felt like I had to work harder, because they said, you know, if you don't have your father around, you're going to be a certain statistic. You're not going to be good in school. You're going to be out here promiscuous. You're going to be sleeping with a lot of men. So at a point, I tried my hardest to make sure I wasn't that stereotype. So I was working my butt off to make sure I got good grades. I made sure I wasn't this promiscuous girl with daddy issues. And like I said, it did, you know, get me into a good position in life, but it was like I was always trying to overcompensate that void with how I felt about myself. I had to work harder for me since I didn't have somebody there. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. Ms. Deanna, let's get back to your parents, because here you are, brand new wife, brand new mother. Let's talk about your relationship with your mom and your dad, and how, because you and your husband, your now husband, you guys have been together for quite some time. Can you talk us through like that relationship?
Well, like growing up, like with my dad not being there, I really didn't want, and he went on, and I have sisters and brothers, you know, from my dad, on my dad's side, but it felt like, you know, he was with them. They had him growing up, and I didn't. For a little period of time, I did stay with them for a while when we were taken from my mom, and I did live there, and that was good, but it was just like, whoa, this is all the stuff that I've been missing. So when I was like growing up, I didn't want kids because I didn't want to like feel like, well, am I gonna be like my mom or my dad? Am I not gonna be there for my kids? So I didn't want kids for a long time. I love kids, but I did not just want them for myself, and I didn't want to talk to a guy that had kids. And I'm like, well, maybe I could be missing out on some things. So my husband, when we met, he had kids. At the time, he had 5 kids. And like my family, like, you're crazy. Like, you're not gonna deal with a guy with 5 kids and you have none. But he was a great father, and he is a great father. So that really changed to see, like, okay, this man is taking care of his 5 children very, very well. When my dad, only when we was with each other, just had me and couldn't even do that. My mom couldn't even take care of the kids that came from her. So it's like, that's what I do want. And then I wanted to have kids.
Do you have any resentment towards your mom?
Very much so. And I'm still working through that. I talked to my pastor about it. I talked to people at the church about it. I've talked to my mom about it. And she's open, but she has this, she still like is dealing with an addiction herself. So she's still kind of like in denial. She doesn't understand how I'm feeling or what she has not done with her not being there. So it kind of always causes us to clash because it's like, Mama, you wasn't there for anything and you're my mom. Like even if you have someone there, it's good. I have always had support, which is awesome. However, you still want your mom to be around. I was just telling Barb, even like going through the questions and then like listening, like going back and like thinking about them. I'm like, my dad has came around, which is awesome. And I like welcome him back with open arms. Like I was happy he was around and happy he's been around and being a good grandfather. And it's like I didn't really give him as much slack as I do my mom. So I'm like, I kind of been.
Why do you think that is?
I'm still like trying to figure that out. Like I think it's because now as a mother, it's like a mom supposed to be there. It's like you are a mother. You supposed to be there for your child. Even if the father isn't there, you should be there no matter what. You make a way. So
I agree. Can you share with us something that your pastor shared with you to help you through this process?
Well, he told me, him and his wife, Zenobia and Pastor Marvin Spence, they are wonderful. Ascension Fellowship, okay. Really, Zenobia, the pastor's wife, she said, it's an addiction, Deanna. And without that addiction that your mom has, she's your mom and she still loves you and you have to forgive. And you have to forgive and you have to, forgive her and then, move on from that so you guys can get through that. You can't, it's, how did they say it? It's kind of like a scar you have. If you keep picking at it, it's never gonna heal.
Right.
Yeah, you still gonna see the, wound that you had because you was hurt. But
Right.
it's never going to heal from that process.
So to avoid the cycle, how are you preparing yourself to be I won't say a better mother, but in hindsight, better, but a different mother than the one you had?
I be there for my baby. I mean, I'm very observant. I talk to her. I make sure she knows that she's loved. I tell her I love her all the time when she sleeps. I love you. When she wakes up, I'm there. I praise her. I show, instill good things in her and things that I want to see her. Like, you can be anything you want to be. I try to be that person to her, that role model, so she has someone to go to.
Barbara, back to you real quick. If you can say anything to your father right now, you on the spot and we got 1 minute, what would you say?
In all honesty, I would say I do forgive him. I wish he would have been there for my brother a little bit more because I'm a fully capable, functioning human being. My brother, however, is not. And till this day, it's a struggle trying to make sure my brother is taken care of. We have a group home and everything is going well, but it's like, I just wish he was there for Brandon. I really do.
And Ms. D, since you're working on forgiving your mom, is there anything, if your mom was watching this, is there anything you would want to say to her?
Mom, just try to stick to, becoming a better woman. If, stick to your word. If you start a program, and you're doing well, continue with that program. Change your surroundings and environment that you're in to be a better parent, not only for me, but for my other 9 siblings, and especially for Hannah. She's the baby. She's 14, but she's the one who really needs you. We all are adults now, and she really needs you.
Well, thank you both,
No
Barbara
problem.
and Deanna. I appreciate you both. Thank you. So it is important to note how important it is that we learn to break the cycle. Barbara doesn't have children, but Deanna does. How do you work past the resentment and the hurt that you were caused to become a better parent? It's important to think about if you haven't already done so. So thank you both, Deanna and Barbara. For those of you who are just tuning in, please be sure to share this post. We truly appreciate it. If you haven't already liked the post, make sure you do that too. Our next guest I would like to bring up is Mr. Zarky. You know, I made a post on Instagram, and, you know, he always comes back with something deep to talk about. And I'm just like, I'm going to pick your brain. I want to know. I think he has something great to offer the people, the community, the Black man. And I think, you know, I'm happy to have you. How are you? Pretty good. So, your mic on?
Check, yep.
All right, we're on. We're live. All right, can we talk about a little bit of your past and your upbringing with your mom and dad?
Well, as I shared with you through IG, mine was complex in a few different ways. First and foremost, my parents were married, so I had both parents in-house my entire childhood, but they struggled with addiction. Addiction to crack cocaine, addiction to alcohol. And my childhood was a bit rough. We were homeless at times. I remember coming home sometime from school, going to the refrigerator, and it being nothing besides beer or beer cans, baking soda, maybe some mayonnaise or something like that, but no actual food. So we spent a lot of time, like evening-wise, eating at shelters or places that actually serve meals, hot meals for dinner.
Yeah.
So it was rough, extreme poverty.
Trust me, I feel you, and I know so many of us watching can relate to that. So given your upbringing, can you go back to that young man who was homeless possibly at some times, eating at shelters? What were you thinking as a young man, as a young Black man?
Survival. So my objective and my goal every day was to survive, to get to the next day, to get to the next week, to get to the next month, year, ultimately to get out of high school, to be able to fend for myself, to possibly go to college. So survival became like everything for me. I learned early on how to listen with very keen ears because, you know, when you're going through extreme poverty, it really benefits you to listen and to understand because you miss opportunities by not listening. So I started listening with open mind, open ears, open heart. Like by the time I was maybe preteen, I had pretty much drifted all the way into the streets. Like ironically, dealing drugs seemed like an out, but you know, when I reflect back on it, I perpetuated the same addiction that my parents struggle with somebody else's parents. So, you know, like it's kind of a vicious cycle like we talked about. Reflecting, it's weird because I never missed a day of school while I was in the streets because ultimately I knew that like school or education would be the bridge.
It'll be the out, right?
It would be my out. And again, that was that learning to learn. So.
Yeah, and I'm glad. So you took the role after dealing with, you know, home life and teaching yourself like survival is extremely important. A lot of you actually went to school and you learned, and a lot of kids tend to act out. And you work in the schools now, right?
Yeah.
Do you see any of that happening?
Of course. So what I tell people, and I do restorative practices, so I'm not just a teacher, like, so I got a different gift that's God-given. I take no credit for it. But I tell people all the time that the behavior is a symptom of the problem and not the problem in itself.
Absolutely.
And when we actually start to understand that, then we actually can start tackling a lot of dilemmas that we see or we like hear being perpetuated.
Are you seeing any headway?
Definitely.
schools?
For the most part, the only thing, so, okay, let me give a little bit of background with restorative practices for me. So my father died in 2007. After my father died, like, I kind of just really, like, was walking with no purpose. You know what I mean? Like, my father died at 46 years old.
Go back to walking with no purpose, though. What does that look like?
So walking with no purpose is basically hopelessness, a helplessness, a selflessness, but yet still, like, doing the day-to-day. You get what I'm saying? But you're not really doing the day-to-day for you. You're doing the day-to-day for everybody else.
Okay.
To seem like you got it together. And in 2017, I was teaching at Webster. It was actually UACB, and it got took back over by MPS, so it was Webster. I taught chemistry, and it was amazing and ironic because it was chaotic in the eyes of a lot of people, but I grew up in chaos, and I'm very familiar with chaos, so for me it was fun, right? And in the midst of doing this chemistry, I was doing a science fair and all this, like, scholastic stuff, and people looking at me like I'm crazy, like, well, you really teaching? Like, the first day I was told by somebody, all you got to do is just get through the day, like, every day.
I feel like a lot of teachers take that approach.
Yeah, and it's crazy.
Failing our students.
Yeah, and I'm like, nah, I'm not going to just try to get through the day because in a year or two, I'm going to run into them at a gas station, and I want to be actually proud when I run into them, and I want them to actually have something meaningful to talk about the experience.
So do you think you're taking, like, what you didn't have growing up, like that father figure? And I'm not sure how involved your father was after the drug addiction, but do you think that you're taking that and being that father figure to the young people?
In a sense, yes. In a sense, no.
Okay.
For me, I just want to give kids a platform, right? Because a lot of times we tell them what they should be and how they should be, and we, like, really, like, kind of write their stories for them, and we don't actually give them that platform or give them an ear to actually describe their own situation. Because not every student that I come in contact with is struggling with this or struggling with that.
Right.
And what I'm learning is that it really does not depend on race or income. Like, all kids, no matter what the race is, no matter what the income is, they struggle with something. And a lot of times, like, it's two distinctive things. Number one is self-esteem, right?
Agreed.
Like, I've never sat in a circle with participants, including myself, that didn't struggle with self-esteem. We're all self-conscious, right?
If you struggle with self-esteem, I'm gonna make some noise real quick.
Right?
I'm making noise too, y'all.
So the next thing is anxiety. Like, everybody is struggling with anxiety because we're taught to not focus on the now, the here and now, but to always be planning and preparing for the future. And I think it's short-lived in reality because, yes, it's great and it's amazing to be able to look forward to the future and to put forth some energy and effort into the future. But at what point do we look at today and say, you know what, I'm here today, I made it today? At what point do we reflect back on our past and actually give ourselves a pat on the back from what we actually grew through?
Yeah, and you grew through a lot.
I
So
have.
shout out to you, and you're doing some amazing things, so that's pretty dope. And before you leave, I want to touch upon just the stigma of mental health in the Black community, specifically in the with the Black men in our community. And, you know, we all know that a lot of issues do come from the homes, and a lot of issues we don't want to talk about. We just think that it's another day. I'm just trying to get to tomorrow.
Okay.
Right?
Yep. So I got a lot of experience with this because I carried so much for so long. And I got to the point of breakdown before I finally did talk about it. Ironically, I was the facilitator in a restorative practice circle and found myself, like, needing to actually speak and tell my story to these participants. And when I did, something changed. Like, it was like a veil was lifted from my life. It was like that heavy darkness that I've been carrying, because of what I realized is that I've been, to be honest, like, keeping everybody else's secret, right? And because I kept everybody
Lot of
else's
weight.
secret, it killed me. So what I would tell, especially black men, is that if you are carrying things that are heavy on your heart, talk to somebody about it. The difference between me now and me then is that me then was a victim, and me now is a survivor. And I'm only a survivor because I took that initiative and I felt that need to release a lot of baggage that I was carrying. And once I did that, I was able to, like, really, really walk in my purpose.
Okay. And before you leave, I'm gonna give you another question to walk in your purpose. What I just want you, because you are a father,
I am.
you are a husband of
I am.
many years, 6.5, right?
Yeah, well, 6 and
Under 7.
under 7.
But
It'll
over
be,
6.
It'll be 7 next year. I mean,
Okay.
next month.
Don't get mad at him now.
Next month.
A lot of pressure under these
Next
lights. No, so really quickly, again, from a man's perspective who you know, acknowledges that he had mommy and daddy issues, what advice would you give to parents to teach them or to start to break the cycle?
I think that first things first, you need to do self-care. Because if you are not happy, if you are not right, you are going to always see the bad in everything, especially your children, right?
Wait, say that again. One time. I know our minute was over, but go ahead and say that one more time.
So you need to focus on self-care, to all my parents, because if you are not right and if you are not happy, you are going to see the bad and the negative in everything, especially your children.
Well, thank you.
Oh,
That's a
it's my
great
pleasure.
note to walk out on. Thank
Right.
you, Mr. Zarkey. I appreciate
It's
you
my
so
pleasure.
much.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you, thank you. That was some good advice. I don't even have kids, and I'm about to go do some self-care tonight. All right, so, yes, if you're just tuning in, please go ahead and like this video and make sure you share it. There are tons of people on your timeline who has no idea this is happening, and because they don't, you can welcome them to it. All right, next up, we have an amazing woman by the name of Miss Lakeisha Russell. She is a therapist working with children and families, and she is just amazing. She's a very sweet spirit, and we are very, very happy to have Miss Lakeisha with us. Well, don't you look gorgeous?
Thank you for matching.
We are. It's the month of love, y'all.
Yes.
So, Miss Lakeisha, so tell us more about your practice. What do you do?
So my practice name is the Evolving Chair Counseling and Consulting Agency here in Milwaukee, and I service primarily children and women who've experienced trauma, anxiety, depression, literally all children and women issues, and I do it by providing individual, family, group services.
Can you define trauma?
Whew. Trauma, I always love to explain trauma just because I think people always think of the most extreme things that can be traumatic. But I'll give a quick example about myself. A few weeks ago, my car was broken into and stuff was stolen out of it. And I was fine. You know, I was like, oh, I still have my car. You know, they stole like some bags of clothes I was gonna give to the Goodwill. But I went on about my way, went about my day perfectly fine. Literally driving back home as I'm getting into my alley, like literally my heart started pounding. I started like shaking. The thoughts like, oh my gosh, what if they come back? What if they steal my car? For me, that was traumatic. But for somebody else, you know, they'd be like, Lakeisha, that wasn't nothing. So trauma is not the same for every person.
Yes.
So it's just dependent on the individual and their way of coping.
Okay, thank you. Let's talk about, we're here to talk about mommy and daddy issues. So if you can go ahead and give us a quick description of mommy and daddy issues. What are they?
Yeah, and I think the guests so far have definitely gave great details of their own stories. And those mommy and daddy issues, I like to say, are those things that, like how you explained, Steph, earlier, that it's in the unconscious, right? So those things that we do based off of our own experiences. So how we think about certain things, especially in relationships, how we treat people, or how we allow people to treat us. So those type of things.
Okay. So do you think people who grow up in two-parent households, do they experience mommy and daddy issues? Because I actually had someone reach out and was like, oh, I grew up with both my mom and dad. I don't have mommy and daddy issues.
Oh, you know, we do. And I think the gentleman before me, you know, he had both of his parents, but yet they had an addiction. And even so, right, because a parent can be physically there, but not emotionally there, right? And you can have both of them present, but emotionally they're not giving you what you need. So then you develop into this adult that's lacking those emotional connections, which makes it hard for you to develop those romantic relationships and maybe even those friendships. So you definitely can have mommy and daddy issues with two parents.
Okay. How does issues with parents impact one's progression? Because we do sweep it under the rug. Then like, no, I dealt with, or I don't think about it, so I don't have to worry about it.
Yeah, and I think that's where you get in that place of being stuck. I get a lot of women in my office, and oftentimes they are there because either their partner is like, hey, you got to work some stuff out because we can't even get to the next level of our relationship. And as I'm pulling stuff out of them, it is those mommy and daddy issues that are deep rooted from their childhood. And so they get to a place in adulthood where they can't get to this next level within their relationship, just intimately. I'm not talking about physically, but, you know, more of that emotional connection, and that's stunting them being able to go to that next level. So whether it is them continuously to think the certain way they're thinking and just be so defensive, so those defense mechanisms that we instilled in us as a kid, and now we carry those on into adulthood.
I have two questions based on what you just said. Can you talk about or give us examples of defense mechanisms? What do those look like? And I know it's different for people, but just to give people an idea as to what they can be searching for within themselves that they don't even realize.
Yeah. So one, and I think we all may be guilty of it at some point in time in our life. Somebody may ask you something or say something, and instinctually you get defensive, right? And you don't even know where it's coming from, but it's just an instant trigger. Or in the sense of if somebody is wanting to be with you and they are trying to get close to you and you do something to kind of push them away because you're just like, oh my goodness, are they going to treat me just like my parents did? Are they going to leave me like my dad did? And again, these are things that we do unconsciously and we don't know it until somebody brings it to our attention.
Okay, thank you. And then what do you recommend as best practices? Like how does one overcome these defense mechanisms or these ill thoughts that rest in their subconscious mind?
Yeah, I think definitely connecting with the therapist because you need somebody to help bring that self-awareness. Like having friends and family is really great, but sometimes I always tell people our friends and families roll with our thoughts. So, you know, they have our back and our thoughts may be irrational. And so having somebody that's objective and that can help you do the work and help you make those connections, because the thing is, everything is connected. Why we think and why we behave the way we do is all connected, especially stemming from our childhood.
Thank you. And speaking of childhood, did you get into this profession because of your childhood, or what led you to becoming this wonderful therapist?
Yeah, thank you. I'm always asked that question. And so I'm the second oldest, and so I have 3 younger siblings underneath me, and so always being able to take care of them. But I think, too, just within this field as I progressed in the different jobs I've had working with children and youth and seeing that it was something more that others couldn't see and always ruled them off. And I was like, but it's a reason why they're doing what they're doing. We have to start understanding what's that why and not looking at what they're doing, but why are they doing that? And then we'll be able to help them better.
Good point. Very good point. Thank you. Thank you for that. And speaking of, like, you recommended going to see a therapist, and just like I asked Sarki, what do you see, or how do you see mental health being viewed from the Black community specifically? Do you find it hard to bring in families to see a therapist, or do you hear about it, or have you researched it? What's your thought on that?
So I think definitely now in the day and age of social media and TV shows, I feel like we're seeing more of it now, just with people creating different organizations like Taraji, and again, just different TV shows having those conversations. So now I think it's more at the forefront of individuals. However, I think we still have those individuals that are the older people who are like, what? I don't need that. I'm just going to pray it away. Believe you me and Jesus is best friends. I love him to death. Saved, sanctified, filled with the precious gift of the Holy Ghost. But I also know, too, we got to do some work in order to activate the faith. So, I was like, he wouldn't bless me to be able to work amongst his people if there wasn't a need.
Amen. Amen. So speaking of work, what advice, Lakeisha's getting all the questions right now, but no, what advice would you give to people? Because children are we never stop being children, right? What advice would you give to us children as we're looking or working towards overcoming our mommy daddy issues?
Being transparent and being aware that you have these mommy daddy issues, and figuring out what they are and why they are, and if you're ready to release it. Because you got to be at that place where you're ready to do the work, because that work is tough, and being in that spot when people are taking off those layers is not comfortable at all.
Okay. Y'all can clap if y'all want to. I thought I heard a clap, right? And then what advice would you give parents? How do they help their children overcome mommy and daddy issues?
Yeah, I think just having those conversations and connecting with your child, being there, spending that time, and just being involved. And again, having a dialogue so you're speaking with them and not at them, allowing them to have that voice.
Okay, thank you, Miss Lakeisha. And if I could sit here and hold hour with her, I would, but unfortunately, I don't have the time. But if you guys do want to connect with Lakeisha outside of here, Lakeisha, can you please give your contact information? How can they find you, book you, talk with you? What's next?
Yeah, so you guys can connect with me on Instagram, Lakeisha LPC, or on Facebook, Lakeisha Russell. You can go to my website, www.theevolvingchair.com.
All right. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
Definitely appreciate your expertise. Thank you so much. Oh, thank you. See, I just seek a therapist. There's nothing wrong with it. Oh, sorry, I almost fell off this chair. Look at God. Okay, but thank you, Miss Lakeisha. Next up, we have, I've been waiting for this conversation, a mommy and son conversation with a young man. I think he older than me by a few months, but a young man who I grew up with and went to high school with, and his beautiful mother, Mr. Emmett and Miss Angela. If you guys can help me welcome them. So how are you guys?
Good.
I'm doing fine. Thank you for having us.
Of course, and congratulations on your recent marriage.
Thank you.
All right, so let's just jump into it. Let's talk about mommy and daddy issues. You guys know this is the conversation. Angela, let's start with you. So, when I made a post about it, Emmett connected with me, and I said, hey, what about your mom? What's going on? How you doing? So can you talk about mommy and daddy issues from your perspective as a mom?
Sure. Well, my story pretty much evolves as a single parent, and I actually started as a single parent at 15 when I had my oldest daughter. And so my oldest daughter and Emmett, I always say, came up with me as sisters and brothers. They weren't like kids to me because I was still growing up myself. And so in that process, I made a lot of mistakes because I hadn't grown up myself either, as in that time.
Because you was just big sister.
I was a baby myself, yeah. But anyway, one of the things I will talk specifically about my sons, as a black female raising black boys, we don't have what we need to be able to give them what they need. And one of the things that I prayed for was to have God put men in my sons' lives that would be able to give them what they needed to be young men. I don't know what it's like to be a man. The sexuality and all that kind of stuff. Some things I did touch on. I won't talk about that right now. But, the reality of it is that as a woman, we really don't know how to raise black boys. They have a different need. They're made up kind of differently. And so it was real challenging. It was very stressful. This particular son right here was the son that challenged me the most, and we had this conversation where I told him, I said, I believe God used you first to give me the tools to be able to give them. So I gave them tools. They had their own little invisible toolkit, somebody talked about survival. I was in survival mode as a single mom. I had one income. I was trying to make it happen. I was at every game and everything like that. But at the end of the day, it was an emotional thing for him.
Yeah.
And it was because of the father not being in the house. God never intended for the woman to be mommy and daddy.
Okay.
God intended for the man to be the man and mommy to be the woman of the house, because there's a softer side, we are the softer side, and there's a hard side, that's the man. So I couldn't give him both. So at the end of the day, he had some mommy issues. He'll talk about that. But for me, it was really challenging, and as a lot of you all talked about, I had my own issues with my mom. I had my dad, which my relationship with him was fine, but my mom's relationship was very challenged. There was a lot of alcoholism and different things that I saw growing up, and it made it difficult for me to be able to really trust as well. So with me raising them, I decided to raise my children differently. So a lot of things that I saw growing up, I didn't do. I didn't do the alcohol. I didn't do a lot of those things.
Yeah. So, let's get into that, because you said as you were growing up, you wanted to raise your kids like you didn't. At any point throughout raising did you see a disconnect? Like, maybe I shouldn't have done that.
I did. I was really hard on my son Emmett, and I was hard on him because of the things that I saw, because his father and we were high school sweethearts. So a lot of things I saw in his family, I knew what my children were going to battle with. And so I knew the alcohol and the drugs and all of that. So I was really hard on him, and he'll tell you that. And it seemed unfair to him, but I was determined not to let him become a statistic. I was determined not to let him go to jail and all these types of things. So a lot of times I thought about, maybe I shouldn't have. But when I look at him today, I'm like, I'm unapologetically about it now, because I won't apologize for how I raised them. And I got a lot of flack for it. I got a lot of flack because I didn't put their father on child support. And the reason why I didn't put him on child support was because of his lifestyle. I didn't want my children to be exposed to some of the things that I saw and I knew that he was exposing them to. It was my job to protect them. A young lady talked about that. Our job as parents is to protect our children. And it didn't matter to me if I had to disconnect from the father and anybody else. It's my job to protect my children from any harm. And to me, that was going to cause him harm.
Oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
And then with you knowing that, you wanted to protect him, that was your priority, right? But you also knew the importance of having a male in
Absolutely.
the household. Did you find, because you also said you had your own mommy issues, did you find yourself navigating or trying to find the right fit for Emmett, or was it having him involved?
It was more of the one thing that I did. So I found myself sometimes, I saw my mommy come out in me a lot of times too, so I had to kind of talk her back a little bit and say, you know what, I don't want to project what I'm going through onto him.
Okay.
And so one of the things I had to do, someone talked about self-care, one of the things I had to do was get healthy myself. I had to do some inner searching of myself and really forgive my mom for the things that she had taken me through. And so a lot of that I had to take responsibility for, that I was too hard on him. Maybe I shouldn't have done X, Y, and Z, or whatever the case may be. But nonetheless, what I tried to do was find positive men that I could trust, because you can't trust everybody.
Amen.
So I had to find positive men that I could trust to have those conversations with my sons and be able to feel safe enough, and it wouldn't take anything away from me. As women,
Right.
It won't take anything away from us if we have strong, positive men as role models to pour into our sons.
Definitely needed. So Emmett, Mama said you're going to tell us about the mommy issues. So as a young man growing up in a single parent household, how did that affect you?
I would say most of my mommy issues came from the absence of my dad, so I kind of gave her hell. I gave her hell because I was like real angry, you know, real
Were you
frustrated.
angry at her or angry at
I was
Dad?
angry at the world. Like I didn't really have a specific person to really be angry at. And then as I started to narrow it down, I got older, and you know, the promises from him and him in and out of my life, and you know, start to reflect on certain things. Then it became to the point where I had developed a certain hate for him, you know. So then it was just I was self-destruct mode.
Okay. Can we talk? Let's talk about, no, seriously, let's talk about it.
Yeah.
Let's talk about self-destruct mode. What, because compared to where you're at now,
Yeah.
I want to talk about the journey. So what did self-destruct look like for you?
Well, growing up, like I was angry, like I was kind of quiet. The love that I wanted from my mom at the time, you know, she did the best that she could, you know, as a single mom. And she knew what the world was gonna, you know, present to me. So, you know, she had that survival mentality, and that's what she gave me. And that's like I always knew my mom loved me, you know, all that. But it was different when it was just like, you know, put me anywhere and I could survive, you know. And it's a difference between survival and then growing up on like that love with two-parent household and, you know, different things like that. So, I mean, in school, quiet, angry, to myself, didn't really deal with a lot of people. I had a temper out of this world. Like, you look at me wrong and I'm ready to go off. So sometimes I try, even now, like I try not to put myself in situations because I know that that demon is still in the closet. So I try to, you know, have a respect for people to just kind of move around and not put myself in the situations. But like I really, at some point in time with my mom, I watched how much of my attitude affected her. Because it was just like, I can't get through to you. You don't listen to anybody. You know, and it was just like, I don't really care. I'm going to do me anyways, you know. So I just couldn't tell me nothing.
Okay. So how did you get out of that image, that space you were in? How did you eventually move forward?
I didn't move forward. God moved me forward, you know.
Let's
to the
talk
point,
about it.
I mean, because it got to the point where you realize until you heal from things in your past, you'll bleed on everybody that you come in contact with. And whether your intentions are good and, you know, you have your highs and lows in relationships and friendships and, you know, whatnot, until you address those things, you would never have a fruitful, healthy relationship. And, you know, it was a blessing for God to kind of put things where it has been with me and my mom. Last year was our healing year, and my mom know I'm prideful. I'm stubborn, so she popped up at my house, and she said, I'm going into the new year last year, and she said, look, I love you. I miss you. What can we do? I apologize.
Let's rewind to how you guys got to that point. Were you guys not talking when Mom popped up?
No, we wasn't.
Okay.
We would go through storms, and it would just be like, no talking, no talking, and you know.
And did that affect you, like not talking to the woman who raised you?
Yeah. One of the biggest things I learned in 2018, God wasn't gonna put the woman that I need and I was ordained to be with until I fixed it and I repaired that. And so that was something that I always kind of looked at. And as I grew my faith, I really believed it. Like, how can you love another woman if you don't have the urge and the sense, the sense to kind of repair things with your mom? And that was big for me, you know. So when she came, it was just like, I'm at my house, you know, I got my hookah going. I'm like, man, look, that's what I do. You know, you want to talk, we're going to talk on my turn. But it never bothered. She always let me be me, you know. Besides, you know, I did struggle, you know, in college with depression. And she would put me on my alcohol limits and be like, you know what, you drinking too much. You know, and I had a good friend at Parkside who, he knew everything. So we would go through a whole bottle of Jose Cuervo, and so she would be like, no drinking for 30 days. So she always let me be me. So when she came to my house, it's never like, oh, I got to go hide this. I got to go put this up, you know. She was just at my house, too. So she really just came, and she was just like, you know, humble, and I apologize. And that goes a long way. And so we both kind of just sat there, and I really listened, and I was in a great space, and God opened up my heart differently than before because, you know, I mean, I got kids too, you know, so it was a lot of things that I was experiencing, I was seeing from her standpoint now.
Okay, and you mentioned your kids, and you also mentioned, you being in that angry space, right? Did you see did you take out any of that anger in ways, not like beating them or yelling, or did you find yourself taking that anger out on your children?
Honestly, no. My
And how
older-
were you able to separate the two if you didn't?
I would say it was already difficult having women issues. So then with the situation with my son, mom, and going through everything that I going through, I went through, I remember the DNA test coming back to my mama house. I was finishing up my initiation of alpha, and it was just like 99.997. I'm like, mama, what I'm gonna do? And so I really don't take out. I think if anything, I'm hard on him because of my expectations and me trying to balance out giving him the survival and giving him the love aspect, the things that my father didn't, provide to me. But for the most part, going to this year, my mom and my other spiritual warrior kind of reinforced to me, give him a break, not a break. And so I've kind of been going with that, but I've never just, blatantly took, my childhood out on him.
And what piece of advice have you been given along the way that you go back, like, I ride or die, I live by this, along this journey for you?
It's funny because when I was at the MLK breakfast, they was talking about like how I choose love because hate is too much of a burden to bear. And when you are dealing with so much negativity, so much hostility, so much anger, that can weigh you down and you become toxic. And you like I said before, you bleed on everybody that you come in contact with. Even if you're a good person, you're a good dude or whatever, it was just, I look back and I had myself in so many situations that I could have did, things a little bit different or handled things a little bit better. So for the most part, I started praying more. I started talking to my mom. I started talking to Pastor Shalina. Like, she has set me straight quick, fast, and in a hurry. And that's been a challenge since the start of the new year. But I wanted better with relationships, whether my mom, whether my frat brothers, whether my kids, like, my son's sister that I take care of, like, it changed my life, looking at it from a different point of view, so.
Okay, thank you for that. Have you forgiven your father?
No.
Do you plan on it?
I have to, per my spiritual counsel. When I got back from Atlanta, they laid it on me, and when we had the little polar vortex, like, I really got locked into my head and was in the house going crazy. I stopped answering my mom's phone calls, and she kind of knew, like, I know it was too much. But just with everything going on in my life and trying to be the best father I can, I still have some aggression towards him. And that's one thing that Pastor Shalina said. She's like, until you forgive your father, it's going to prevent you from having the best fruitful relationship with your son and also with your mom's husband, And so she called me her boyfriend, and that's her husband, so,
Okay. So if you guys didn't take anything from that, let's work on forgiving. It's so important.
Yeah.
Emmett, your mom is sitting right here. If you could say anything to her, what would it be?
To be honest, I think she knows everything about me now. Like, I have no hidden secrets. I think the one hidden secret that I had, we kind of clarified up, and, we both kind of cried and healed together when it was just like, going through my women issues as far as like trusting and really building and kind of going back and saying, hey, you know what, Mom, when I was growing up, I had these issues with my dad when you would be at work and he would take me around older women and they would molest me. And then it transferred into when I got older, what my perception of manhood was and, what I thought love was. And it got to the point to where I was able to heal and address those things and kind of self-reflect. So my mom knows everything pretty much about me. I think if I had to choose anything, she knows that watching her get married was like my breath of fresh air for love. It was like moving from that survival to, love is a good thing, you know, if it's done right.
Yeah, Emmett, and you can't say that with 1 minute left of the show and think we just not gonna talk about it. But going back to being molested as a young male, and we won't get into the specifics,
Yeah.
but can you, and I think that's something that we overlook, especially we don't think about it happening to young boys,
Yeah, it's
and
not
it is
reported.
happening. Yeah, can you, I just want you to, one, awareness, use this as an time to bring awareness to that, and like what process or thoughts did you go through doing that?
I think most of the time when even now that I've kind of been talking about it in my mentoring realm, it's more common now, you know, and I think now is just being able to open up and to give young men the ability to say, you know what, it happened to you, it's not right, and it's okay to talk about it, because when you talk about it as a man, sometimes it's just like, you know, what you crying about? Like, it's a woman, it's, you know, but it's wrong, you know. So some of my thought process is just like really going back and just being able to be like, man, you know what? I'm never gonna have a good relationship if I'm so secluded, or I put myself in these positions where I'm disconnected, and it's just like nothing lasts forever. That's and anything that I ever had, it was just like, you know what, eventually they're gonna leave. Eventually, you know what, if it was a sign that I didn't like, it was just like I washed my hands with the situation. And they put me in some tough, difficult situations, but yeah, pretty much.
Talk about it. It is not right. I don't care if it is a woman, right? Miss Angela, you see this young man next to you, raising children, being an advocate for other children, on the quest for love. What do you have to say to your son?
Well, one of the things I tell Emmett all the time is how very proud I am of him, because until you walk in someone else's shoes, you really don't know and understand what their journey entails. And so once he stepped into that single parent role, he began to understand the hard decisions that I had to make, some of the sacrifices, because it's not about you anymore as a parent. It really becomes about the child. And so I'm extremely proud of him, because I've watched him through his journey, and I've watched him struggle. I've watched him, you know, make some mistakes and everything, even with me. But being a parent is not up to the child to reach out. It's up to the parents to reach out to make sure we go back and make amends. And that's where it has to happen at, you know, because we are the parents. And so with him, I love how he walks. I love his swag. I love everything about him. And it's going to make it very, very difficult for a woman to come into his life, because he's very independent, and that's how I wanted to raise him. I wanted to raise strong Black men. I didn't want them to be weak or anything like that. And so he's very intelligent and educated, and so he can stand on his own. And so when someone comes in, it's a compliment to him. And so that's what I'm watching him now, just walking his purpose and his destiny at this point. And I just keep encouraging him to keep stepping into that area and keep walking and walking with that pride, because, you know, the society tells men it's not okay to cry. It is okay to cry, because you can't hold that stuff in.
Agreed.
It's not good, even for a woman. And so when I see him now, he's very transparent, and he's upfront and personal about where he is and what he wants out of life. And I love that about him. So that's what I have for him.
Yes, keep feeding into this young Black man, okay? Let's hear it one time for Miss Angela and Emmett, y'all. Thank you guys so much for joining me on the show. I greatly appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you, absolutely. So, you guys, that wraps up our conversation. And although I wish I could, you know, sit and talk about this topic forever, I can't. I want to thank you guys for tuning in at home. Thank you all for being here. It's greatly, greatly appreciated. One, if you didn't take anything from this panel of wonderful people, work on forgiveness, work on awareness, and just being transparent. There's always something to be learned. Please take that in mind, or keep that in mind as you're working with young people. If you're parents, you're working with your children, be mindful of the struggles that they may have and the struggles that you may have yourself. Thank you so much to Power Forward Media. We got DJ Shakes in the back behind the camera making me look good. Okay, he made all of us look good, okay? But no, thank you to Power 4 Media. Thank you guys so much for tuning in, and it's not too late to share this video. Have a great night.